Good morning, you guys. Oh my goodness, I decided to bring Wolf out with me. I don't know if this is a good idea, but I'm going with it. I'm rolling with it. He's out here, and hopefully we make it through this walk without incident. So far, he's argued through a wall with other dogs. Anyways, and he's not letting me take him. Let's go. So here he goes right here, you guys. So, emotional check-in today. I honestly feel really, really good. And let me date stamp this is October 1st. So we got 2 more months to go, and we're in 2020, y'all. That's crazy, right? So come on, if you're gonna go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. So let me start off by this. I went on my Instagram. I did a series of stories to let people, coincided with the video I just posted yesterday, and it was saying it's okay to not be okay. And let me tell you, I reached out, like a couple of people reached out to me after this video, and I felt amazing knowing that it opened the door for people to feel safe enough to talk. So it rekindled a friendship with a friend that I had before. And honestly, we used to have a really, like in high school, we had a really deep friendship. I am so sorry, you guys. Like, noise is really just a thing right here. In high school, we used to have a lot of really deep talks, and I realized, you know, we always had a different kind of relationship in high school. And here we are again, you know, picking back up and having a different type of relationship again. And I'm really, really happy that, you know, I was able to at least open that door for her. So that's my emotional check-in. I feel amazing just based off of that. And oh my gosh, my day started on a high note. So what is going on and what is the topic of the day? Well, oh no, there is some poop right there. So today's post on Instagram that I did was, a friend of mine had posted this, and I was like, wow, this is a really good topic. So it says that people are divided into 2 categories, basically. People who are repeating the trauma that they had in their childhood, and people that are trying to break the cycle. So for Talk About It Tuesday, that was my post on Instagram. So I think, you know, for me personally, I was straddling that fence. Like, I was on both sides of the spectrum with certain things. With my kids, I broke the cycle. With my marriage, there are times that I'm repeating the cycle. So I straddled that fence. I think I just became more concerned with my kids because I was the kid in the situation than I did in my marriage. But I'm not 100%, you know, on either side of that. You know what I mean? I know there's things that I do have to work on as far as communication when I get angry. Like, yeah, I can get really bad sometimes. So that's just keeping it funky. I have a mouth on me. That prompts me to think about, like, everybody else in the world, what they're thinking and how they're feeling and how they're trying to break cycles and not knowing how, not knowing where to start, not knowing where to begin. And it doesn't even have to be something completely drastic when you're doing it. It could be something, oh my gosh. When he's out, I feel like dogs are everywhere. I'm like a paranoid person now. It doesn't even have to be anything drastic when you're trying to break the cycle. A lot of times it just starts with acknowledging that you know that there is a cycle. Because a lot of times, like, our parents don't realize that there was a cycle. At least, you know, from the generation in which my parents were from, they didn't realize there was a cycle. They just was like, they pretty much chalk it up to, it is what it is. This is how you're raised. Bruh. I'm about tired. He's about to do one lap and go home. I'm over him already. They don't even acknowledge that there is a cycle. So acknowledging that it's there is like the first step to anything, as acknowledgement, you know what I mean? Taking the first step to go to the gym, all that stuff, it all starts with the first step. So even if you feel like you've been in that cycle, now let's get in some rain on here. I want to let him go and go to his dad. His dad's right up here. Acknowledging that is the first step. Then you want to know, well, what is the next step? A lot of times the next step is probably going to be therapy, because we have to learn to unfold things, and sometimes we don't know how to unfold it on our own. So going in and talking to a therapist would be the next step. And if you have friends like mine, they'll help you unfold and unpack that shit, you know? So shout out to Elsie. Thank you for always helping me unpack my trauma. So therapy is key. A lot of times, like, I'll tell you, when I was 18, he's so happy to see him.
Happy to see me.
When I was 18, I had started therapy. I had something traumatic happen when I was 16 years old, and I tried to deal with it on my own for 2 years, and I could not. It was overwhelming. So when I was 18, I was like, I'm gonna go to therapy and get this like shit off my chest. And I started going, and I didn't tell my parents at first. And I was going for probably like 6 months. And they're like, where are you going every Tuesday? Like, why do you leave for work so early on Tuesday? And I'm like, I'm going to therapy. And they're like, well, why are you going to therapy? What is wrong with you? And I'm like, what's not wrong with me? Like, where do I begin? And they didn't see a need for it. They thought it was weird. So I'm just like, it's hard to explain. My daughter started therapy last year. We did group therapy, I believe, or the year before. Was it last year or the year before?
I think it was the year before.
I can't remember. It was either 2018 or 2017. I think it's probably 2017, correct. But nonetheless, I told my dad about it, and he was like, why is she going to therapy? And I was like, this is like a natural response for people in your life when you're trying to do better. But they just don't understand that coping is not always the answer. You need to work through that shit sometimes. Used to coping with their, can you not touch everything? Their emotional trauma, that they don't know that there's another way to deal with it. And you can actually unload your baggage and not have to carry it everywhere with you like we're taught to. So my family is just like, you know, I believe they did marriage counseling once. When I was, I think, in my late teens, they did it. And it didn't last very long. Okay, friend. You got a lot of stuff in you. Oh, he's done it like 5 times since he did it right when we left, and he's just continuously going. He's marking, I think. So they went a couple of times. They didn't see what they wanted to see in the couple times, and yeah, it ended. Kevin and I had been to therapy, I don't know how many times, started therapy, and part of it like stops because of me, because I don't like the therapist. And no, for real, like, I don't like, if I don't vibe with the therapist, then I don't want to continue on. Like, what's the purpose of unpacking all your shit to someone you don't like? So there's just a certain approach that I want in therapy that I don't get, and I just want to get to the meat and potatoes and call it a day. So if we're unpacking childhood like trauma, let's get to it like right now. And you know, 45 minutes is not that long. So you just start unloading some shit after the pleasantries are exchanged. And then it's like, okay, well, bye. I'll see you next week. And I'm like, we spent so much time saying, hi, how are you? How was your day? And now when I'm trying to get into it, it's over. So I do have a little, like, you know, I need a 2-hour slot so you can say hi for the first 30 minutes, and then the hour and a half is for something else. You know, if you don't know where to begin as far as where you're at, if you're the person that's carrying the childhood trauma to the next generation, then I think start with therapy, because we don't all necessarily know how to unpack this stuff.
Definitely somebody give me a guy told me.
Come on, bro. I'm gonna take you back home.
They said you cannot see, if you're in the frame, you can't see the picture.
That's a good one.
That's Liz Brown said that.
That's a good one.
You gotta have somebody that's out the frame that sees it and can pull you out the frame, pull you out the picture, and say these are things that we can improve.
Come on, bro. Yeah, and that's true. So I feel like, you know, if you don't know where to start with that stuff, definitely figuring out, because a lot of times too, the other thing about childhood trauma is figuring out what was normal and what was actually the trauma. And sometimes you can't differentiate between the two, which is what I was saying about our elders. Elders tend to be like, this was normal, but it was actually trauma. Okay, so if they don't acknowledge that it was trauma, it's hard for you to acknowledge that it was trauma. So that's why I think therapy is very important, because it will help you differentiate between what's normal and what's actually not. So I've had people look at me when I go to therapy, and they're like, the therapist will stare at me, and I'm like, yeah, well, this was normal in my house. And they're like, that's not normal. What do you mean it's not normal? I grew up with it for 20 years. How is it not normal? And they're looking at me like, girl, that's like emotional abuse. And I'm like, oh, wow. Well, I thought it was normal. So learning to differentiate between what's normal and what's not is, you know, the first step, because what you grew up with is not necessarily normal. It's just normal to your household. I think I gave a lot of passes to things. I'll say that, because I felt like my mom had been through a lot with relation to my father. And so I gave a lot of passes to her, because I felt like she never dealt with that part of her trauma. She never went to counseling. She still hasn't gone. And I feel like she needs to go, but I'm not going to tell a grown woman what to do with her mind. She's come a long way, but it's also with age. So, but if I bring him up, it's over. No matter under what context I bring him up, I can understand why, you know what I'm saying? But that trauma she had with him was passed on to me, and it became my burden. And so I was like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do these things. And I had to work on myself, but I still have pieces of my mom in me. You know, everybody has something to unload. None of us came from a picture perfect house. And if you did, shout out to you and your family for having it emotionally together, because a lot of us are out here walking around with not only our parents' shit, but our grandparents' shit and our great grandparents' shit. So, you know, I can only go back as far as my great grandmother, as far as how much I know what we're dealing with. But yeah, we're all unpacking shit all the time, and sometimes you're just adding stuff. You're not even unpacking it, you're just adding new shit on top of it. Like, we all have things, and it's okay to have things, you know what I mean? As long as we're all trying to work to better ourselves, because at the end of the day, we just want to be good people.
That's it.
We just want to be good people, and it's not always easy when you're dealing with stuff from your childhood that you didn't know was stuff, because it was seen as, this is what happens in my household.